Welcome to jobs.ac.uk Careers in China webinar on living and working in China. My name is Dr. Christina Yan Zhang, an international education expert. I was made in China, reinvented in the UK. I spent the first 7 years working as a student leader at National Union of Students UK, implementing the international strategy of the UK government, and another 7 years evaluating and advising most Chinese university presidents to become more globally competitive as my role of China Director of QS, the World University Ranking Evaluation Agencies. Today, we are very happy to provide an opportunity for you to learn more about what it is like to live and work in China, with insight from a panel of academics that has either made this move themselves or supported faculty member to do so. So I'm very delighted that we are going to go around the room and invite our panelists each to give a 30 seconds brief introduction about themselves and their university. So shall we start with David?
Hello, I'm David Andrews. I'm Associate Professor of Business English at the School of English for International Business at Guangdong University of Foreign Studies, GDUFS. I have been in China since 2018. I spent over 20 years teaching in the United States, mainly in Chicago. And since I've come here, I've been focusing on cross-cultural communication courses, writing courses, business communication courses, and also trying to help my students sound like a native speaker, which I don't think I have done yet, but I am still trying. And and so GDUFS is a very international school located in Guangzhou. It has an amazing number of international teachers, and we always need more. And it's a wonderful place to speak English because literally everyone here seems to know English. And so I remember a question from yesterday about going to expatriate communities, and I find I don't even need them because Chinese English speakers are pretty much the people I hang out with. Okay, so that's it from me. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Yeah, could we also invite Keith to have a brief introduction about yourself and your university?
Hi, yes, I'm a state recruited expert. I've been in China for 10 years, and I should very much emphasize that I have no intention of leaving. This is where I intend to live and work for the rest of my life. And I spend all my time here. Really important to say this, because a lot of people, foreigners come to China and they work only a certain amount of time. So I'm a professor in the University of Electronic Science and Technology of China, which is the #1 university for electronics and communications. But in fact, I'm a neuroscientist. I work in the biomedical area. I'm developing therapies and biomarkers for autism spectrum disorder. That's my specialty. Yeah, I'm looking forward to answering any questions that you guys have.
That's wonderful. I think we're also very delighted to have a colleague, from the same university, Dr. Ma Lan, who is joining us. So Ma Lan, would you like to maybe introduce yourself to our audience, please? I think you're muted. Yes.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Thank you for your introduction in the same case. And I am Malan, and you can call me Melody. I'm from the same university and the University of Electronic Science and Technology. And I am in charge of talent recruitment and development. And it's my honor to be here. And the main campus of our university is situated at Chengdu, the city of over 1,000-year-old cultural history in the land of abundance. But also we have institutions located in other parts of China, such as Shenzhen Institute for Advanced Study and Chongqing Institute and Yangtze River Delta Institute and so on. These institutions also carry out high-level research, enroll graduate students, and have been strongly supported by the local governments. And our university has recruited and cultivated quite a number of outstanding scholars with high reputations in different research areas, and warmly welcome all talents around the world to join us in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And next, we are very happy to have Stijn from Zhejiang University.
Good afternoon. My name is Stijn van der Veen. I've been a full-time professor at Zhejiang University School of Medicine for the past 6 years now. I'm also adjunct professor at 2 affiliated university hospitals for the past 4 years. I was Assistant Dean of International Affairs and International Recruitment. Also last year, I launched a new international academic journal located here in China called Infectious Microbes and Diseases, with myself as a founding editor-in-chief, together with one of the accommodations here in China as the leader. Overall, I think China offers great opportunities for career development, and so I warmly welcome all of you to join our academic community here in China. Thank you.
That's wonderful. And we are also having like 2 academic leaders from Xi'an Jiaotong Liverpool University. So perhaps we can start with Stuart.
Thank you, Christina. So my name's Professor Stuart Perrin. I'm the Associate Principal of the Entrepreneur College in Taisang, which is a new initiative that XJTLU, Shanjiaotong Liverpool, is launching to develop entrepreneurial education. Like Keith, I've discovered I have a lot of things in common with him, not only just the same haircut. I also have no intention of leaving China. This is where I have chosen to live. This is where I've chosen to work, and this is where I hopefully will choose to pass away. Now, not for a long time though, because I want to actually welcome as many of you as I possibly can to come and work in China in any of the institutions that we are representing today, but specifically at Shanjiaotong Liverpool University.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And our last panelist, Eddie, over to you.
Thank you, Christina. So my name is Eddie Fang. I'm a Belgian-born Chinese. I've been in China now for 8 years. I'm currently the Deputy Dean of the Business School at Jiaotong Liverpool University. Prior to that, I was the head of the economics department in the same business school. Thank you.
Thank you. That's wonderful. And next, I think there are a lot of audience watching our, session today, and I'm sure you must have a lot of questions. So there are some housekeeping rules. If you're watching the live today and want to ask a question, please use the chat box on the side of your YouTube screen to ask your question. You will only be able to ask a question in this way if you are signed into YouTube. If not, you can tweet at jobs.ac.uk using the hashtag JobsQ. Or the third way is most of our panelists will be moving into individual meeting rooms at the end of this webinar. So feel free to visit them, if you would like to discuss your career opportunities with a particular university. And the join the instructions are already available in your pre-webinar email and in the chat box at the end of the webinar. So let's start it with some of the questions we already received from our audience. I probably want to ask the first question. I noticed a few of our panelists mentioned that they are planning to live the rest of their lives in China. So I wonder what make you interested in China in the first place? What make you decided to move to China to work and live here? Shall we maybe start it with Keith?
Okay, yeah, am I unmuted? Okay. Everyone has, complex reasons. I already knew, had a very good Chinese friend who was actually working in the UK, and he made me aware of the schemes in China for recruiting senior talent professors. And, I identified through him a university which really wanted someone like me, which happened to be UESDC here in Chengdu. And then we went through the process, and I came. I'd already been to Shanghai and really enjoyed it. I'll probably say terrible things like, I would prefer to live in Chengdu rather than Shanghai. And believe you me, I've been in both, and Chengdu is a really lovely, lovely city. Apparently, it's the #1 big city, in China to live. Most importantly, from my point, I'm a scientist, right? And in the UK, I took early retirement, in fact, and I wanted to do things that I couldn't do in the UK, and China offered me that opportunity. I'm very much into translational research. I mentioned that I'm trying to develop therapy for autism. I could not have done that in the UK because I was working on different areas. And so, I've had a huge opportunity work-wise, which will continue for as long as UESDC will employ me. And they've made it very clear that that could be ever, But, most importantly, I think I love China. I love Chinese people. I think it was already made a comment, as a foreigner, if the first thing you want to do is to get in touch with the expat community, and that's really all you're interested in, you're not really going to appreciate China. You need to immerse yourself in the culture. I don't even see the difference between Chinese people and, other cultures. It's an incredibly safe country as well compared to European or certainly America. And yes, it's a very family-based culture. It might not, if you're young though, I've got young colleagues who are foreigners too, and they have plenty of entertainment downtown, and, it's not just a sort of boring family culture. You can have whatever you want, but it really suits me. I very much, enjoy working here. I feel very comfortable here. It doesn't matter that I don't speak Chinese. It really doesn't. I'd love to, but unfortunately, I seem to be very bad at learning it. So I can't really think of a better place to be because, here I'm really valued, far more valued than I ever was anywhere else. And I'm also talking about the UK. And this is something that, you can't put a price on. So I feel that I'm valued here. I can do what I want. I really enjoy the lifestyle. And yes, I can live very well here. The salaries are maybe equivalent to what they are in Europe or America, but your money goes an awful lot a longer way as far as I'm concerned. So in general, these are the kinds of reasons behind my wanting to stay in China.
It's really interesting you say that. I actually been to Chengdu many times, and I was told it has been consistently voted as one of the most family, friendly and, human-friendly environments. It's like really beautiful, and you have so many different delicious food out there, which is.
The food's fantastic, and we don't only have pandas. Everybody, thinks about Chengdu or pandas. Yeah, we have hundreds of pandas. If you love pandas, this is the place to be. But the food is amazing, and yes, the people are really friendly. I think wherever you go in the world, if you're transplanting from your culture into another culture where you're completely outnumbered, you want to feel comfortable as a foreigner. Yes, the kids particularly look at you because they haven't really seen that many foreigners, but it's just curiosity. There is really, you're actually, people like to see foreigners, in China. There's certainly no antagonism towards them. You feel valued. And often when I have colleagues here, everybody wants to have photographs with them, especially with the kids, especially if they've got blonde hair and blue eyes and things like that. So it's a very welcoming culture. And yeah, not everybody speaks perfect English. I'll be absolutely honest with you, but they try. And we have wonderful apps on the phones, and we also have WeChat, which will translate for you. And we have a lot of ways that we can communicate, even with someone who doesn't really speak much English at all.
That's wonderful summarization. How about Stuart? Because I think you also express like a similar view. You want to live the rest of your life in China, obviously in Suzhou, which is another really beautiful city.
Well, I'll try and slightly different angle, because I think Keith's actually covered many of the things around about social life. I'll be completely honest. I didn't come to China because I wanted to come to China. I came to China because they offered a good job. And that was purely the reason I come here. And I think that's something important for everybody who's listening and watching today, there are job opportunities in China that you may not, and definitely nowadays probably won't find elsewhere. Having come to China for a job, which was I was head of the language centre when I originally came here. Since then, I have had a number of different positions. I was the first dean for international affairs at the university, first dean for learning and teaching at the university. I'm the associate principal. Now, these jobs, may mean something to somebody, but the most important thing is the opportunity that is available to people when they come here. If you look at Eddie, he's a young, fresh-faced boy in many respects compared to some of us older people here. He's done really well for himself because of the opportunities that are available. There are opportunities to work and to progress within China that I don't think that you'll find elsewhere. And the pace that things can happen, the research potential, the research opportunities. This means that I have no intention of wanting to work in a more traditional, shall we say, steeped in tradition type of university back in the UK. I'm sure Keith will know what I'm talking about when I talk around that type of thing. And so there is opportunity. The social life, the way that you're welcomed, all of those things, there's nothing I can add that Keith hasn't said, basically. So I think from both the work perspective, the opportunities available to progress and to progress your career and different directions, and from a social perspective, I couldn't imagine or recommend a better place to work.
It's really interesting you mentioned about the career progressions, as academia in China, because I often read news that the youngest, like a professor, full professorship in some Chinese universities, they got it at their 20s. Where I remember if we can get something like 30s to become a professor at a UK university, that's like very, very amazing. So perhaps we can get Eddie, because you had like a very, quick, progression of your academic career in China. So would you be able to share a bit based on your personal experience in terms of academic progression you have got in China?
Absolutely, happy to. So just to give you a quick picture of my current situation, I got my PhD about 8 years ago. I graduated from the University of Cambridge, and I came to China right away. Of course, I have different motivations for coming back to China, and this is really due to my origin and having grown up in Europe. I wanted to come back to Asia and come back to China, which is why I came back. But then at that point, I joined XJTLU, so Xi'anjiang Liverpool University. It was a very young university, and I cannot agree more with what Stuart has said earlier. It's just that there's a lot of opportunities here, and especially for everything that is related to international development and international opportunities, which is why a lot of the foreign faculty would come to China for. There's a lot of room for development and for growth. And in my 8 years, I think that I've done a lot. There was also a lot of research funding that was available for early career scholars that I could tap into and transform the funding into research and publications, etc. But at the same time, I was bumped up to head of the department really quickly. And after that, with the experience that I gathered on that end, I recently took up the position as a deputy dean of the business school that has 135 faculty, 5,500 students. And I really do not think this is something that I would have been able to do have I stayed in Europe. So there are definitely a lot of opportunities that are related with I think the tremendous growth potential that are around international opportunities in China.
It's really interesting you say that, because actually I have a few friends who I met through my previous work, and one of them is like at his 30s, and he's already vice president of a university. And the reason he was able to have such quick progression is because he's extremely good at academic publishing. He has lots of publications in Nature and Cells, etc. First author, first organization. So he actually got a full professorship, perhaps like a few years after he has finished his PhD. And then it's like almost like taking a rocket. And I never see anyone, who can have such major progression at such a young age. So I think perhaps China have more flexibility in terms of career progression for top talents. Yeah. And also another thing I think, our audience has asked is what will be the normal working, style, in China? So what are the work-life balance in a university there? And how's that compared to that of the UK? Because obviously, in China, people sometimes working quite long hours. Is that the same, expectation for academia here? Could we have Stan from Zhejiang University to comment on this?
Yes, sure. I think work-life balance is hugely variable depending on what you want out of your work life and also what level you're in. Students here in China are working day and night basically, especially at the top universities, because they want to develop their career and they're often highly motivated. And so basically you will find them always late at night still at work. And actually, this is quite common. And I have to slow sometimes my students down and say to them, it's okay to go home, if you want to have some fun, that's possible. I'm not checking on my students whether they are there. But when I come in the evening or in the weekend, most of them tend to be around, even though I have for sort of a flexible mind about whether they are there all the time. I mean, if they're there during working time, I'm fine with that. Some faculty, though, they will check on their students. As a faculty member, though, it's purely up to yourself to decide what your life-work balance can be and what you want it to be. Nobody is going to monitor any faculty, whether they are working or not. You can basically take a holiday and nobody would even bother checking up on you, I believe. As long as you do your obligations, your teaching, and as long as your students get good supervision. For postdocs, it's a bit in between. I think a postdoc, as a foreign postdoc, it depends on your supervisor, how they look at this picture. Young faculty members, depends also if they are still in a supervisor's group or whether they are more independent. I mean, I think it's quite flexible and dependent on what you want out of your own personal life, I believe, yes. But hard work is quite common in China, yes.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you so much. David, would you like to perhaps add a few points on the work-life balance, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the work-life balance, much as Stine was saying, it can be what you want it to be. Because honestly, I've had a lot of different academic posts in the US, and the demands for extra service from universities are much more onerous and intense in the US than here. Here they ask you to do something now and then, but you're not on a lot of committees. You're not in some kind of publish or perish situation where if you don't want to publish, you have to anyways. And so it can be what you want it to be. I find myself if I want to be overloaded, I quickly am, because I can easily pick up extra classes. I can tutor foreign language students all the time if I want. I can proofread as many things as I want because there are always opportunities. So it's up to you. And so only if you're like me and you can't say no will you get overloaded. And that can be remedied very easily. You teach what I find here is you teach your classes, do a good job with your students, and that is it.
Interesting. I think, many of the audience, they are quite, worried if they can't speak Mandarin, how, they can make the best of like maybe working and living in China. I wonder, our panelists, do you have any advice for them? Shall we start with Keith?
I only know literally a few words and phrases, and I know several European languages, but I will admit that learning Mandarin defeated me. And not just me, also some of my younger colleagues. However, we have an international school at the university here with 400 or 500 non-Chinese, speaking students, and they're trained, and most of them will become pretty proficient in Mandarin. These are young guys, they're in early 20s and so forth, within a year or so. And certainly if you're young and you're coming here, of course, I would encourage you to take the advantages that all of the universities, I'm sure, will offer in terms of training you to speak Mandarin. It's not really necessary to write it. It's like two different languages. I say for old guys like me, the amazing development of the translators, they're not perfect. You make mistakes and so forth. You know, WeChat has just revolutionized. I can talk easily to people anywhere in China who actually speak no English at all. And so it's not a big thing. And if you go down the shops, it's relatively easy to communicate. Actually, we also pay pretty much everything now using WeChat. You don't sort of see money here anymore in China. Regarding cultural differences, I mean, some people, including my Chinese colleagues, think, say I'm actually more Chinese than they are if they're based in the UK. I've kind of adapted, to the culture. You do have to learn to be patient, probably the biggest virtue, because things don't always move quite as fast in China as you might like them to. And one important thing, which, when things don't get done in Western countries, one of our reactions is to get angry. This is really something you should try to avoid. Chinese culture hardly recognizes anger, and you really, you should only use it in extreme, patience and, persistence to get what you want done, and find the right person as well to help you. You really need help, and we are babies here in a lot of ways, and we do need help from locals. But so you need to find the right people to help you. And I'm very lucky. I mean, I have a group of over 45 Chinese people. But actually, getting back to one of the questions earlier on about how late they work, yeah, I was a bit shocked too when I first came that they were working until 10 o'clock at night. But you have to remember there's a lot more social life goes on between the students. They go out together a lot, mostly to eat in the restaurants. And so after 5:36, when they have dinner, yeah, they continue working till 10, but it's not quite so hard, at that point. And I think it's quite important because they work really well together as a team. They're not all individuals. They help each other, and they spend a lot of time together. So, I mean, yes, of course they work really hard. I don't want to say that they don't. But there's also an element of in fact, socializing that goes on. And most universities have, amazing, not only dining facilities, but leisure facilities, beautiful campuses and so forth. So, and I think one of the things that the Western postdocs and students coming to my lab say, wow, you have a much better social life in the lab than we ever did. And I certainly, I know my lab, my group back in Cambridge were not social. We would just work the whole time. It's different here. So there is a nice balance. There's a lot of work, and people work, as long as it takes. But they also do have quite a important social life. So. But I don't want to say anything else.
Can I offer a little different view on this as well? I realize, as Keith, as a very senior person, obviously he has a big group and a big network as a result of that. For young staff, if they move to China, language is very important, I believe. Of course, finding your way in China isn't too difficult, but finding academic connections and building your network in China has major advantage if you do speak some of the language. So I would still recommend anybody having plans to move to China really try early on to learn the language if you have the chance and the capability, because it will really make life easier in China, I believe. Even though you could do without, it's a major advantage.
I agree with you. I just, for some of us, it's not possible.
I know it's not easy, no.
Great, let's move on to the next question. So the opportunity to work in China for a few years sounds very attractive. So could any of our panelists tell us a bit more about the impact pursuing this will have on the longer term academic career of individual, academia? Could we maybe start with David?
Well, I came to China after kind of kicking around American academia for 21 years since my PhD. And I served in every academic post I could. I was a visiting professor. I was an assistant professor. I was an adjunct professor. I was a lecturer. I was other things too. And I could never rise above his assistant professor. And in fact, that was the first job that I had, was assistant professor. I stupidly left that job because getting an assistant professorship fresh out of the university made me think that I could always do that. Well, I never did it again, okay? And so my last job before I came here was visiting professor. And I've published 4 books and like 30 peer-reviewed articles, and it didn't matter. There's just too many people with PhDs in the United States, too much competition. And so I had been thinking about moving to a different country for a while, and China seemed like an obvious choice because English seems to be a national obsession. And I was right. I got here. My status was international teacher, and within 1 year I was associate professor. Okay, so I solved the problem that I had not been solving for 21 years in 1 year, and so that, you know, I don't see why that couldn't happen to other people. I mean, obviously it helped that I had established all these publications, but it wasn't helping me in the United States. I can tell you that. So yeah, so I thank China for that. I don't think I could have done that elsewhere. Okay.
That's really inspiring. I have to say, you pretty much like achieve like a thing which in 1 year rather than like 20 years each here. So I wonder, maybe Eddie, do you want to chip in to see if you might have a point on that point?
Well, I think that I mean, if some people would be interested in coming to China for a couple of years and they want to come back and to go back, so the key point would be mobility, right?
Yeah.
And I really do not think that it is a problem enough. But of course, I might be talking only from my perspective, from business economics kind of research, in a sense that now increasingly Chinese universities are increasing in terms of ranking, and they do value international ranking quite a lot. And from that perspective, the benchmark for quality research is going to be very similar to the benchmarks that we would have in Europe or in the United States or in other parts of the world. So that means that any research that is done here, maybe with funding from Chinese institutions, will be published in recognized journals all around the world, and that will ensure and guarantee mobility later on. Of course, provided that people coming here are able to transform this funding into research. But I think that if we look at this key factor that enables mobility, then I don't think it will, people will find it difficult to move back to or to move away to another country after staying in China.
That's really interesting. Thank you so much. And we just had a question coming in, which sounds really interesting. It said, are there any age or limitation to work as visiting researchers or professors in China? What are the main difference between visiting roles and the ordinary academic roles? I wonder if we can have Melanie, because you are a leading expert, in HR at university. So could you please advise us on that, please?
Yes, and perhaps in China, and we don't have the firm limitation about the age for the different positions, but we'd like to welcome the senior person to apply for our professor position, and we really welcome the young doctors or the scholars to apply for the other positions, and we only provide the positions just due to your academic achievements, not just we defined with your ages. So I'd like to say if you are really interested in a position, and then you can just send your resume to the schools you are interested in and to express your job intention. And you should trust us, the schools and the university will arrange the reviews. And then after passing the evaluation, they will negotiate the work contract. Then you will see what position they will offer you. And then you can have some details and perhaps you can discuss or negotiate with them.
It's really interesting.
Can I add
Sorry.
something?
Yeah, of course.
I think for this type of question, it's really, really important for all of the people who are watching to understand that there is no one thing called China for this type of thing. There are different policies in each of the provinces within China, and there are different policies within each of the cities and municipalities within China as well. And so one of the most important pieces of advice would be, if you know where you would like to work, check out what is it that that particular province or city actually would like to do. And there are things such as age restrictions, and I think people need to be aware of that. There are visa policies which change between cities, within cities, between institutions, and between provinces. I think that is something that people should understand. There is no one thing called China in this type of situation. If you want to work in Shanghai, there will be more restrictions, for example, if you wanted to work in many disciplines, because more people want to work there. A simple fact. If you wanted to work in a smaller city, a tier 2 university, for example, somewhere that not many people want to go to, there are more opportunities. If you have a type A visa, because you're looking at associate professor or professor level, then you have certain things that are available to you that maybe somebody on a type B visa wouldn't have. So it's not a simple black and white answer, and I think that's important for those who want to work to know. So I think Melody's advice about contacting institutions to find out what is available is really, really important.
I completely agree with you. And I think when I was studying for my bachelor at a Chinese university, we have a lot of retired, like overseas professor who become, full-time, professor at our university. And I know they really loved it because they still have their pension plan, paid by their, previous university, but they live in China. So imagine if I'm a UK professor, the exchange rate between Great Britain pound and Chinese RMB, I think is 1 pound equals to like 9 RMB. So I can earn the same amount of money in China together with my pension plan, but everything else is so much cheaper than my domestic country. It sounds like a perfect plan. I don't know if any of the panelists have similar experience in that front.
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I'm retired in the UK, so I have a pension in the UK, but I'm 66, right? Which is actually still quite young by for a professor, foreign professor. I have friends from America, for example, who are professors here, who are well into their 70s. The problem is that once you get over the 60 mark, you can't apply for quite a lot of grants, and you really rely very heavily on your university for funding you. And although I agree that you really must check for each different province what their rules and regulations are, and I know Sichuan's very good because Melody, it's a good place to come. It's a very big province as well. But what I've found in China is, yes, there are rules, but it's amazing how flexible those rules can be if a university wants to change them, or so it's better, of course, if you're within the rules, and great. But Chinese universities in general are trying very, very hard to recruit people, and if it means a little bit of flexibility in the rules, especially regarding age, they will hopefully be able to achieve it for you. And if they can't, find a university that can.
That's great. David, I remember previously you were talking about you can have easy, access, taking taxi everywhere you go in China, where you can't really do that. So when you were in America, could you maybe explain a bit more?
Yeah, it seems like some of the panelists might like to ride subways more than I do, but the fact is that I lived in Chicago and New York, and when I visited European cities, it would be places like Paris and London, and everything is very expensive, and I usually avoided taxis in those cities and my own home cities, because literally you could go 10 miles and it could be sometimes $50, which is 350 RMB. Now, here, I simply choose not to use subways. not that I could use them, and my wife often sometimes kind of demands that I do, but taxis are so cheap, inexpensive here, and I just feel it's a luxury I've not had before. I can just go anywhere I want in a taxi, as long as the traffic isn't too bad, which it is, I agree, sometimes. Yeah, I mean, and that's just one indicator of many different things. I find maybe, I only live in Guangzhou, but Guangzhou is not the cheapest Chinese city, certainly. And I find restaurants inexpensive. I find food that I take home inexpensive. I find many things inexpensive. And on top of all that, one of the common perks at Chinese universities is they provide accommodations, and I have that too. And so maybe a benefits package that initially doesn't seem so great, if you factor all that in, it is pretty great actually. Most of my pay that I am paid, I can just figure out what I want to do with it. Not when I lived in Chicago. That money was all like, this is going here, this is going here, this is going here. I don't feel that way anymore. Somehow I have much more, what's the term? I don't know. I have more spending that I can just choose to do. What is that called? Oh, never mind. Anyways, that's it. Thank you very much.
That's wonderful. I remember, on the accommodation side, Stan, you mentioned something about, university accommodation. They offer you like apartments, very big apartments, and some of them it's like the value increased by how many times? I think you mentioned several times.
So it really depends exactly at what level you are, and the size also depends on what level you are. So generally, lower level staff and postdocs you can rent for very low costs, like $50 or £50. You can get a reasonable size apartment for rent. Buying is something else. So if you're more senior staff, you also have the opportunity to actually buy apartments through the university at really low cost. Now the catch is they require you to work at least for several years at university, so it's not like you can buy it and leave it. But basically those apartments, when you buy them and you stay long enough at your university, I mean, you buy them at, depending on which university, at anywhere from 20 to 60% of the commercial value. And then of course in time, those apartments, depending on when you got it, they can be increased 5-fold or 10-fold if you're lucky. So there's lots of advantages. I mean, this could be part of your recruitment package. There's indeed, like David says, many opportunities for your recruitment to discuss and negotiate, which could be very valuable for yourself. Living costs indeed are much lower. I always tell postdocs, I mean, your absolute salary here in China is probably slightly lower than you would get in Europe, but the money that you have left at the end of the month is probably 2 or 3 times more, because the living cost here is so much lower overall, especially if your postdoc has opportunity to rent apartments through the university. You can save a lot of money from that already, yes.
That's wonderful. Let's move on to the next question. So relocating to work overseas can look complicated. So could our panelists explain the process, especially on visas and any additional support the university might support? I wonder if, Melanie, could you be able to provide some advice on this front?
And okay, thank you. And actually, once the contract negotiations are finalized and the process is relatively simple regarding visas, etc., and the university is experienced at this now, and particularly in terms of sorting out the required long-term visas after you have arrived here. And it often happens that you don't have all the necessary documents to allow you to immediately apply for a long-term employment visa from the UK itself, but it may sometimes be easier to come here initially on a short-term business visa, and then this can be ungraded as required after you are here in China. And I want to emphasize is that China welcomes the first-class talents from the world, and China is now providing more competitive and attractive environmental conditions for overseas science to work in China. For example, recently China has issued a plan for comprehensive reform in Shenzhen and proposed to establish a talent introduction system with international competitiveness and provide various green channel services for foreign higher level talents. So we are very familiar with these procedures, so they don't need to worry about this. Thank you.
That's wonderful. It's really encouraging. And on the point about accommodation, I actually want to add another point is many of my friends, I was told once they secure like a permanent, academic position in China, because they only spend maybe 20% to 50% of the commercial price to buy, the university properties, and the value increased so quickly, as Stern, you have mentioned, like 5 times or 10 times in a few years. And as long as they work in China for a certain period, maybe like 5 to 10 years, once they purchase the property, they have full ownership of the property, which is, again, I think a great, investments, for the family. So on that front, I wonder, any of our panelists have bring your children or spouse to work in China, and do you find it easy to transit the family, to the Chinese environment once you move to China? Could we have maybe Stuart?
That's easy for me because that's a no. Both
Oh,
counts.
sorry.
But actually, I can still answer the question from the university's perspective. I think certainly in terms of bringing spouses, it depends on what type of visa the spouse comes in. So visas are always important. We do try where we can to find employment for spouses on campus if that's possible. But again, our foreign expert bureau, the people who issue the visas in our city in Suzhou, want people to have had experience of working at a university for that to take place. What we've recently done is talk to other joint venture universities in the region, and we are creating a sort of system, if you like, a little where we can employ each other's spouses if that's possible. So we can try, and because we have a number of different joint venture programs in universities within a 30-40 kilometer range of each other. So there's ways that we can work on that. In terms of children, I think most institutions probably offer some form of educational allowance to help foreign children go to international schools, though international schools are not cheap. They are more expensive. The older the children get, the more expensive they become. So staff would need to, in many cases, find some funds to help their education for their children if they go into the private system. My advice would always be on this to discuss with your HR that you're talking to. As Keith has mentioned earlier, in China you get no and then you find ways around it, and that's just the normal way of doing things generally. So you might get, oh no, that's not possible, so you then go back and go, okay, so what is possible then, and then you start the negotiation along those lines.
That's wonderful, because I remember when I was like advising lots of Chinese university president on creating world-class universities, I said, remember, you probably also want to create world-class international schools. So when top academia, they bring their family to China, it will be convenient for them to have their kids be educated on the top level, which will be really reassuring. Yeah.
I think just to add to what I've just said, I mean, many Chinese universities have affiliate schools, schools which are affiliated to those universities, and there are potential through there. Our own university, we are a private not-for-profit joint venture university, but we now have 2 affiliate schools which does enable us to put some children into those schools as well. But it's worth finding out what are the affiliate schools. There are always a number of different possibilities. Basically, never assume that the first answer that you get is the only answer.
That's wonderful. And our next question is, one of the attractions to relocating to China is actually to travel and explore Chinese cultures. So could you please tell us a bit more about the potential to do all of this alongside an academic role? And how could I find a new network of friends if I made it to China? Could we have Eddie to, share your view about this?
Sorry, absolutely. I just didn't catch the last bit of your question. It was about traveling.
Yeah, so lots of people, they want to relocate to China because they want to explore more about different, culture and tourist attraction in China. So they want to double check how likely it is to do that on top of an academic job in China.
All right. I do have to say that I'm very glad to answer the question. I just have to say that my perspective is a little bit different. Okay. Because I actually do speak Chinese and I'm Chinese. So I did have to rediscover the culture and the language and the country, but I do speak the language, which might make things a bit different, right? So I just have to say that up front. However, I do think that there's a lot of opportunities on this end. I think that when we mingle within the academic circles within China, I did find that it was quite easy to network with academics in Chinese universities. They're very keen on reaching out to faculty that can tap into international journals, that are able to work with them and transform their ideas for an audience that for readership of English in international journals. So I found it quite easy to make friends and reach out to academic circles within China. And of course, that creates a lot of invitations to other universities, to travel around the country and really to mingle with people. So I think that being an international scholar here really does help. It gives us an advantage and people want to work with us. And if we also put in the effort and reach out to them, I think that creates a lot of traveling opportunities and invitations. And to build on what we were saying earlier, I think that I'm regularly invited to give keynote speeches in national and domestic conferences, especially the ones that the conferences that are actually run in English. And again, this is an opportunity that I would not have had in other places. And that also taps into your question, meaning that actually allows me to travel quite a lot within the country.
That's wonderful. And my last question today is some of the academia, they're quite interested in commercialized IP as part of their research. Do you think China has any, advantage in supporting that for academia to set up their own business alongside, academic career? Shall we try Sten from Zhejiang University?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think classically, actually, almost all Chinese professors have a business on the side. It's actually maybe the younger generation that has it much less. But for my university, for my medical school here, I think all the older generation professors, they all have commercial companies involved with some of the IP they filed a long time ago. It's so normal here. There's a huge pharmacy industry, which there's a lot of smaller size companies, and they're very interested in developing new ideas and developing that together with academia, because that gives them sort of a guaranteed quality and name stamp. And so these kind of opportunities, they're massively abundant here in China, yes. So I would say developing commercial products here is actually classically the number one focus of professors. Is actually the younger generation that is much more interested in doing fundamental science nowadays. And those are the younger generation professors that came back in the last 10 years that were educated in real fundamental science at top universities around the world. So fundamental science is actually only in recent 10, 15 years picking up as a result of that. While translational science have been huge always in China, I think. Yeah.
That's really exciting, actually. So does that mean pretty much, someone can move from, outside China and then start their academic career, progress really quickly, have really secured a future, but also at the same time potentially become a millionaire or billionaire in a very short turnaround?
So I think the opportunities for international faculty to develop here companies on the side is more complex, because you need to find your way in the local networks and the local sort of systems, which actually as a foreigner will probably be much more difficult than for a Chinese. And so I would think it's important to team up with people that are familiar around your city, with the local governments and the local pharmacy to support in that. But I mean, academic development, I mean, China science is booming. If I see Zhejiang University, our school, it's amazing what's done here. Before I moved to China, I was at Oxford University, and I can say what they do here in science, it's just the same level. It's fantastic. So, I mean, that you can do here anything you want. Funding is much more highly abundant, I would say, here in China than in most other countries. So I think it is developing very, very positive, yes.
That's wonderful. I think it sounds like very exciting, but unfortunately we already have 4 minutes before we need to, close the whole webinar. So could I have each of the panelists, summarize, what they want our audience to take away today in 30 seconds. So shall we start with Eddie?
All right, I'm first one to go. Okay.
Yes.
Right, so, okay. As a summary, I think that China provides great opportunity. We've covered this a lot, I think, through the discussion in this hour. Also, something that I also want to, highlight, to manage expectation is that it is a different country, it's a different continent, a different experience, different language, and it will also create times in which people are going to think that, oh my God, this is really difficult. So it's not always rosy, all the time, but then I think it's worth the effort. And personally, I'm very glad that I came here and developed my career here.
Wonderful. Melanie.
Hi. Yeah, our university is that can provide, that can fulfill your research ambitions and help you to live a happy life according to your specific needs. And we will guarantee a higher salary than you have now and provide more than what you can think, even for your family, your children, and accommodation, and so on. And if you have further questions, welcome to the UESTC meeting room, and we will share more details. And you should trust our university. Perhaps I don't have the Midas touch, but our university really has. Thank you.
Wonderful. Keith?
Well, I reinforce the biggest challenge is moving here. And you have to be brave. And although I'd already spent a month or more in China, and I'd visited, which is quite important to visit China, I think, before you move here. And most universities will give you that opportunity. I mean, it's difficult at the moment, but under normal circumstances, you can come and visit and have at least a little bit of an experience of what it's like here in China. But, offset against that is the enormous opportunities. I could not do anything like I can, do here, anywhere else. And yeah, there's funding, you're valued. And so, and the life is good, really is good. And the level of standard of living is very high. So it's a risk for most people that's worth taking, but you do have to balance things very carefully. Don't just rush in. Everyone, you've got families, and you have to look at things in detail and ask questions. Really important. But generally speaking, I haven't met very many people who came and said, "Oh, this is terrible. I want to go home." There will be some, of course, but mostly people are really happy, even if it's only for 3 or 4 years, not just long term, like people like me. So it's a real opportunity, and grab it, because let's be honest, a lot of young people, in science and whatever, they're having big problems finding jobs in their own countries. So this has got a big opportunity for people in that situation.
Fantastic. Stan?
I would say anything is possible here in China. And so it's just a matter of shopping around and discussing with lots of different places what you want. And I'm sure you can find your place. I think it's just a matter of looking and seeing what are beautiful cities, what are beautiful universities, and you will find something that is suitable for you.
Wonderful, thank you. Stuart?
I'll try and be very quick. So I'm just going to say a few quick words. So first of all, there is a lot of potential. So you can realize your potential here if you look around. You need to be flexible. Not everything comes straight to you. You need to be prepared to sometimes go around a twisty route to get to where you want to go, but keep taking those steps. You're going to get there. Keep your eyes open as well. Everything isn't always rosy, as everybody said. But actually, at the end of the journey, at the end of the tunnel, there's always light, and I think that's really important. And if you want to find out more, we have a webinar, a Zoom webinar following on to this.
Fantastic. David?
I've already talked about the career opportunities that I could not have, encountered anywhere else to make up that much time in so little time. And also to have so much, I see someone suggested disposable income. Thank you very much. That was the term I was looking for. I have a lot of disposable income here. But I think the last thing I'll say is that, yes, it's adventure and it's doing something new and it's all that. But it's also, if you are a teacher, you will encounter a different kind of student. And I have fantastic students at GDUFS, but they are different. And that is, something wonderful. I would probably miss my students most of all, and they are not American students. I'm from the USA, and so I like to tell my students that Chinese students do their work. They come to class always, all of them, and but they don't talk. Okay, in America, American students don't do their work and they don't come to class, but they always talk. And so they are the exact opposite. And I would kind of wish my Chinese students would become just a little bit more American, but I'm happy that they come to class and do their work. And some of them are so sweet and so intelligent and wonderful, and it's just a different teaching experience altogether. So I encourage you to experience that. Thank you.
And my final word is really on behalf of jobs.ac.uk, I want to thank all our fantastic panelists for their really exciting, discussion and input today. And thank you all for watching. We hope you have, enjoyed this session. And any question, feel free to get in touch. All the best and take care. Bye-bye.